incredible. Oh, sorry, Karina. We've got a Karine on the line as well, who, by the way, to everybody who's wondering, Karine is one of the amazing people behind Code Untapped who helps manage and set up all of our events. So you all got your tickets, you all saw your material because Karine went out and set that all up for you. So big thank you to Karine for setting that up as well. Look, that's been absolutely amazing. We only have about 25 minutes left, but I've got some great questions, and I know there's a few that have been asked from the audience as well. So one that's come in immediately from Andre, how do different designers collaborate together to build products? So for example, visual designers and experienced designers. And this question, if all three of you take your mics off, right? This one's out to all three of you. Let's turn it into a discussion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So where we work at K&C, we tend to have one visual designer we call product designers and an experienced designer, one of each on each project. So any research that's going on, everybody's a part of it and everybody knows about it. So everybody's along for the ride from day one, essentially. And whilst the visual designer might not have that much to do in the early stages, they could start to be exploring the brand identity and some of those aspects. But really, it's further towards the end of that initial engagement that they would then start to like really get more involved. And so in terms of sharing like the ambitions and outcomes of the users, everybody's just in it together. So there's no kind of handover or gatepost of like, this is what needs to be done, or kind of, kind of debriefing session. It's just all quite organic and everybody's in the team together and learning everything at the same time. Does that answer your question, Andre, or do you want more specifics?
So if Andre's got any more, he can feel free to chuck the question into chat. Okay. I do have a question about this though, and he's just said, yes, it does, thank you. I do have a question. You touched on Agile. Now, I've been a developer, I've been a CTO, and I've seen it work really well, seen it work badly, but what tends to happen, especially with design teams, is you end up with a design team and you end up with an engineering team. The design team goes and does their bit. They show their design to the engineering team, who then huff and puff and complain about them. And then it kind of goes back to the design team. And then maybe it ends up back in the engineering team. Something gets built and then the loop kind of iterates. How do you get these teams, in Kin+Carta, do these teams genuinely work together? Are they do you form teams? And how does that work as you're going forwards?
Yeah, so it's slightly different now, we're not in the office, but generally the way it's set up is if you have a team, you'll have everyone sat in the same place. So the developers will be sat next to the designers, the product owners, Agile, everyone's together. So it means rather than having to kind of throw something over the wall like you do with Waterfall, you can just ask the developer next to you, like, I'm thinking of this, what do you think? And then we also have stand-ups every day, which is sort of a 15-minute ceremony where the whole team gets together, talks about what they're working on, and kind of raise any issues or queries. So that's like a daily thing. And when products are into production, we have a thing called refinement. So it usually tends to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Karina, usually weekly. And that's basically a session where you sit down as designers with the developers and go through things one by one, figure out if they're building the right thing and it's exactly the way you've tested it and exactly the way you want it to be.
So in terms of that design cycle, let's look at a standard 2-week sprint. There's some design work that needs to be done. There's some engineering work that needs to be done. And there's some testing that needs to take place within that process. What tends to happen? Do you have your designers doing some bit whilst your engineers kind of sit there and wait? And then, within that 2-week period, they then get a handover from the designers, they do their work, and then it gets handed over to the testers. How do you prevent your 2-week sprint from just becoming a mini waterfall?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I think the thing that springs to mind is the setup of the Kanban board, or whichever type of board you use. So you have your columns of the progression of the tickets. So you've got a task to do that would be on a ticket. And initially we didn't used to really get involved in that as designers, but since for the past few years now, we've made sure that designers have a column so you can see where that task, which is usually related to an epic, I'm getting into detail now, but into an epic.
No, please,
so
tell us.
Yeah, it's either a feature or an outcome of this is, so going back to that example of the TV portal, for example, one element of that might be, say sign up. So sign up would be the epic. And then you'll have multiple tickets within there that are design related. And then you'll be able to work together, and through those discussions and those ceremonies and conversations that you're having, you'll then be able to prioritize which one of those tickets the engineers will be picking up first. And then in terms of testing, I think it does tend to be a bit more waterfall-y, but I think some testers are able to kind of code review as well. So that doesn't mean it necessarily has to they only pick that up once it's been built, but they can start to test on that whilst it's in progress, depending on the type of thing that you're working on. Yeah, and I think it's just about having that visibility as well of what work is required and what's coming up. So you've got a backlog of all those ticket items and those tasks you need to complete. And then you'll go to your in progress column and you'll have things in review to be signed off, and if things are blocked because you can't progress for whatever reason. And the best is when it gets into done, that done column, such a sweet spot.
And I think that's where the kind of roles of product owners and delivery really become important, because you can get really focused on your designs and everyone's really focused on the development, and you need someone that's cracking the whip a little bit, and that's sort of their role to make sure things are going to get delivered and there's no blockers along the way.
Okay, amazing. So one of the things I often see is a build it and they will come mentality, and it's usually because they're worried about how long this initial design phase will take. Typically, how long do you spend in that first design phase before the actual engineering work starts? And what tips and tricks do you have to speed that up if necessary?
Keep coming with those great questions.
Yeah, these are all really good questions.
Sorry, this is my founder hat coming out. I apologize.
Were you going to answer that one, Talia?
Typically when we have clients come to us at Kin+Carta to do that discovery research or discovery sort of phase of design, so going through the actual double diamond process really thoroughly, it can take up to 3 months, but it really depends on how well defined the problem is and how much work they've done up to that point. If it's really, really undefined or really unspecific, then we can we can define it for ourselves, and that can, it really depends on the problem. It could take maybe one round of research where we're okay, we feel super confident that this is the problem space that we want to investigate. These are the ideas, these are the hypotheses that we have, and we think that's going to do X, Y, Z. But you can do 3 months of research with a really maybe a very well-defined problem that's been sort of passed down from stakeholder to stakeholder to stakeholder through a series of miscommunications, and you can still come to zero. And you need to rework it all from the start. Yeah, so I think I don't know if I've answered your question then, but it just depends.
How long is a piece of string, right? Tends to be. But it's great to understand that there are differences, there are ways to approach that problem, right? I see a great question from Nihal, and this is one that often comes up, right? Which is, and I think you touched on it earlier on, which is, what is the role of UI? And what he says, he often sees that alongside UX design and UX research, the roles tend to be quite blurred. So what is the difference between UX and UI?
I can go. Yeah.
Okay, you go.
Well, UI is basically, it's defined as user interface. So it's anything that is visual, the elements, the buttons, whereas UX is all encompassing. So even before you've built or designed anything. It's the research side, the speaking to users, understanding the problem. And then the UI is as you get a bit further down into the solution space, like how do the buttons work? What size are they? What color is it? What's the branding? So it's like one stage, but it's much further down the line. It's not right at the beginning. But you often hear UX, UI as a title, but it should just be called UX because it encompasses it all.
So I'm going to ask another question about that. How would you define a head of product?
Head of product. I think head of product should have a basic understanding of like what is best in class for each of the disciplines within a product. So you've got an understanding of how to conduct research well, not necessarily that they can do it themselves, but they should be able to see like, you know, like this is a basic pass of like good research. Likewise for design, also for strategy, getting an understanding of business strategy and market strategy, and a bit of an understanding as well of like code and engineering. I mean, I know it's quite niche, but to get I think ahead in the game a bit for all of the touch points to really be a head of product, because you need to be able to guide people in making the right decisions. You need to know enough about each of those topics and those subject areas, I think.
Brilliant. Well, the questions are coming in thick and fast now. People are really starting to unload. Before we go over to those couple of questions that are in there, you touched on research quite heavily, right? Now, obviously, we talk about data in technology a lot. How much of a focus on data do you see within the product team, and what kind of tools do you use to try to collaborate the responses and the results that you get back from all the research that you do in order to drive that decision-making process?
Well, I think us as experienced designers at K&C, we don't touch a lot of like the big data and analytics in that way, but we have worked on projects where we work on alongside business analysts, sort of to see more high level, if they already have a product that's working or it's not working so well, and we're there to help, you know, dig in a little bit, sort of see, you know, from a high level, what are the interactions that their existing customers are already conducting through like different journeys. How are users going through that journey? So are they able to complete them? And what, like using those touch points, very like asking very specific questions to those business analysts to help us start to ask ourselves more specific questions of where we can help to improve that design process. So I guess if we think back to like the experience mapping part of the synthesize phase, like using those as different touch points as well, to help feed into those experience maps and make them more true to life. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to one of the audience questions again from Andre. You know, he's got some great questions in here. As someone who is thinking of creating their own product, they may think about designing for one kind of platform, such as Android devices. But what are some of the challenges of designing for multiple platforms, especially during the early stage of designing a product? How much time and effort do you put into thinking about that?
It's one of the first questions you should always ask your client, if you're working for clients, of course, because it does have quite a big impact on the design overheads. So, for example, there are standard interactions and standard behaviors on all the different platforms. So how you might display a list or a menu on Android will be quite different from Apple, and you will want your users to feel familiar in their surroundings. So when they're looking at their app, you might tend to make that specific to that platform. So you will need to have variations in those designs. Likewise, if you're also designing for iPad as well, tablets, again, it's almost, obviously you want it to be as closely related to the experience on a mobile as possible, but you've got just a lot more real estate. So you will change that layout, and it's almost always, or it should be quite different layout and design on that as well. So as early as possible, you need to get some guidance from the client, or make a decision if you're a startup on what platforms you're going to be putting your product out on, or who you're going to be targeting, because it's better to run those designs in parallel rather than work in one, and then find out that actually by translating those designs to another platform, you realize you've got to probably change something in that original one. So it's better to keep those the designs happening in tandem. And in projects in the past that I've worked on, we'd have designers who are specifically responsible for the Apple. If it's just a phone only, not going to tablet, you'd have somebody responsible for Apple designs, somebody responsible for the Android designs. But as Zaina described, like, we're sitting next to each other, we're having those daily stand-ups, we've got printouts of our designs on the wall. Now more often we have like Miro boards with our designs, and even collaborative design programs that we use, such as Figma. It's like having a file on the cloud, so you can be working at any time on the same files as your colleague. So, you know, you're always fully aware of what is going on, or any design progression or progress, so that you're not kind of like, you know, like misaligned in terms of your approach and your designs. So it's just making sure, like, basically just collaboration and communication is just the most important thing in these projects, and getting this stuff right.
Okay, brilliant. All right, so got one more question from the audience. Rocky, so I'm a back-end developer with a background in graphic design, and because of that, I've been asked to oversee the UX UI development of our product, a small startup. He's introducing the importance of user research to his colleagues, and he was wondering if you have any tips on how to make sure that they understand its importance throughout the design process. So to summarize, how do you help your colleagues understand just how important this design process is?
I think what's really helpful is to, I guess, start small and also start to socialize it. So if you can set up even like 15-minute, 20-minute sessions with participants or people who might be your users, and invite people into those sessions and to sort of interact with the product, or even just talk around it. Seeing the people talk about that is super, super compelling. Yeah, even if it's not them next to you talking about it, even if it's through a Zoom call, like having the conversations about it and then socializing it so everyone can see the immediate feedback, or even like it's very compelling to have someone say, this is amazing, or even if it's, this isn't so good, or this doesn't suit me. It definitely is way more impactful than you telling it, for you speaking on behalf of the user. So if there's even a possibility of like spending 20 minutes with 5 users a week, or every 2 weeks, or every 3 weeks, just making it super lightweight and super unintrusive to your existing sort of like workflow and everyone else's workflow, and inviting people into that session, that's like super, super helpful.
Yeah, and in addition,
really good point.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, in addition to Talia's point there, the most interesting sessions I've been on are where the designs that I've worked on just don't work. Like, the user struggles to achieve the outcome that we've designed for, and that's just like, those are just the best sessions, because you're learning so much. You're learning so much about how people, you know, like, you have to leave all of your assumptions behind, and you're forced to leave your assumptions behind then. And then you've got the evidence to help you just keep on designing better products. That's really all we want to do, is just keep on getting better and designing better products at the end of it all. So.
Okay, brilliant. Jay, is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on from what Karina was saying. It's just, that was just Ez's qualified no, wasn't it, really? Yeah. But I just wanted to add as well, the double diamond approach. I don't know if this is true, but it looks like it's like what I would call domain agnostic. Yeah. And is that true, the double diamond approach? And is the objective then, if it is, then to actually by actually going through the double diamond process to become a domain expert. Because by going through that and, you know, really interacting with the stakeholders, the users, you actually, you know, you feel their pain, you understand all of their pain points, you really understand, you really narrow down the outcomes. So effectively, does the double diamond process enable you to become a domain specialist? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, particularly because we work at an agency, you work in lots of different sectors, and you start off knowing nothing about the area, and then by the end you're a bit of an expert, you know the buzzwords, you know how the industry works. And actually, the more you can work in different sectors, I think it helps when you're designing in another sector, because you take learnings from those different sectors. And yeah, in terms of kind of the type of product, it could be service design, that you can use double diamond if you're building an entire service, as opposed to just an app or a website as well.
Okay, brilliant. I have one last question, and that's my question, and connected to a question from Nihal as well. And this is, he's asking a question for complete beginners. For people looking to pivot into UX from another industry, what do you look for in terms of how a CV is adapted to UX roles, for example? So, you know, if you're moving from one career to another, what do you look for?
I think Zaina's best place for this, is she's made the switch herself.
I think it's the soft skills, because it's all about talking to users, interviewing users, and then dealing with stakeholders, and just having a lot of empathy. So I think if you can show that you're a good listener and you're a good learner, you can pick up new skills quickly, and that's the best thing to come across. Because I didn't have any design experience before. I changed from a completely different career, and I think it's the soft skills. If you can show them, that's, you know, you're on the way.
Brilliant. I think as a last question, given that, I just want to ask, for the more advanced product designers, what do you look for in a product designer when you're hiring one onto your team? And that's to all three of you. What's the key thing that you look for?
For me, it's definitely the process. So being able to see demonstrations of a very good process, thorough process of understanding the problem and the user outcomes, and showing that you've understood the user, and also then balancing that with the business outcomes, because that's obviously so important as well, because the business needs to achieve their OKRs, their KPIs as well, with whatever solution you come up with. So demonstrating that you can do that, as well as then showing how that has manifested in designs and experiences, and yeah, I really like how you've taken that to the final stages.
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably the process, but also collaboration, because as we mentioned, working in Agile, working with developers, you're not working siloed, and it's not just about what you think is the right solution. So being able to collaborate, take on other people's opinions, and also just demonstrating that you've had to deal with challenges and overcome challenges in work. Nothing's all smooth sailing, as we know.
And Talia, any tips from you?
Yeah, I think for me, when we're like screening CVs and things like that, I generally just want to see some logic. Like, it's fine if you have, yeah, I don't know, you came up with something A, but you really need to explain why you got there, how you got there, and have some sort of, like, I don't know, some rigorous way of thinking about the problem and your design solutions around it. It doesn't necessarily need to be the prettiest thing. It needs to be a functional thing, and it needs to be a contextual thing. So, like, it doesn't really matter if your portfolio or your CV is not like the most beautiful thing, but if it's like logical and I can see your train of process, that's like super, super helpful.
Amazing. All right, so I think we've just about reached the end of our session. This has been absolutely amazing. The time has literally flown by. Big thank you to all three of our panelists, Zina, Talia, and Karina. Thank you so much. That was an incredible presentation, really well given, and the level of knowledge that I think I've come away from. And I've got over 15, almost 20 years of technology delivery, running startups, building product, and some of the stuff I've heard today is stuff I wasn't aware of. So this has been absolutely fantastic. please be aware that the next event in this series will be starting in, I think it's in 2 weeks' time, and it will be on the 30th of March. And you can find the link to it down below. It's just been posted in the chat. And as requested, the actual slide deck is available in our Slack room. So if you want to join the link that we posted, you can go in, you can read the slide deck, download it, and have a bit of a think through some of the content that's been talked about today. And I believe the next event is all about conducting user research, isn't it? And I think people need to bring a pen and paper to that one, don't they? It's a little bit of interactivity. So please do sign up. Be great to see you all again. Congratulations to the team. Fantastic event. Well done. And again, big thank you to Karine for organizing it. Untapped, very pleased to work with Kin+Carta Create, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session. If any of you wish to be kept up to date about anything, you can go to the Untapped website and sign up to our newsletter, and we'll be telling you about new events that are coming up. Okay? And don't forget, K&C have jobs in product, so please do go and have a look on their website and see what's available. Okay? All right, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great evening.
Bye.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.